Okay, good afternoon and good evening, depending on where you are. This is another in a series of online seminars. I'm Michael Moradz at Pacific Cup Yacht Club Commodore, at least for a couple of more months. With me, or not with me actually, are Mark English and Ian Rogers. Mark and Ian took the 2016 Pac Cup on the More 24 Moss, and that's spelled with an exclamation point. I don't know how that changes the pronunciation. Oh, look at that! You're wearing. Okay, I wore green in solidarity. Nice. Okay. Um, so Pacific Cup has always had a special warm place in its heart for the double-handed entries. It's been that way from the beginning. It sometimes annoys the crap out of the fully crewed boats because with the fewer people on board, they're able to maintain a lighter boat and go faster. But that's kind of what makes it fun. So I asked Ian, and Ian asked Mark to come talk about what's special about double handing. I think even those that don't double hand or otherwise shorthanded or just want some tips are going to get a lot out of it. So I'm going to fade into the background, except for if you've got particular questions, go ahead and post them on the Q&A or on the chat. I'll be monitoring that, and we'll put those up or interject those where it's appropriate, and we'll try to get answers. Meanwhile, Ian's got some slides to share. Ian and Mark can go ahead and talk, and I'm just going to fade into the background.
Okay, I guess first question is, can you guys see the screen?
I see it.
Okay, perfect.
Good for me.
All right, well, that answers all the questions I need to know. Yeah, my name's Ian Rogers, and that's Mark English, my partner in the 2016 Pac Cup. We're going to talk a little bit about double handing small boats to Hawaii. I guess first thing we're going to talk about is why would you double hand? It's a fantastic adventure, and Mark, you can allude to some of that.
Yeah, I think our kind of sort of the start of our Pac Cup really kind of was in 2013. We did a windjammer race from San Francisco down to Santa Cruz, and we had just an amazing spinnaker run for about 2 hours. And when we hit the dock, we looked at each other and said, this is we should do this to Hawaii. So it wasn't so much about thinking about double handing. It was it was more about sailing the boat and how much fun it would be. And the More 24 is definitely a double-handed to Hawaii type of boat. And so, that was kind of what launched us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great challenge and a great adventure. I think it's fun because you're on deck. It's just the two of you figuring out how to get the boat there the whole time. Mark and I don't have a whole lot of friends. We have trouble fielding crew, so that's another reason to double hand. And if you hate sleeping, that's the final straw. That really not double. Why you want to double hand?
Yeah, we Ian and I we should also mention we had both of us had newborn children. We had 4. Ian had 2 under 2. I had 2 under 2 at the start of the race, and we had infants during most of the prep for the race. So we were well set up to not sleep.
Yeah, sleep deprivation was king. You will get a lot of social interaction out there with your crew member. Actually, you'll never see him. Mark and I very rarely saw each other. So when you see like a Matson ship halfway to Hawaii, you're going to pick up the radio and ask them all sorts of silly questions. I was curious if they still had Mai Tais in Kaneohe. They do.
And as I recall, the ship replied back. They asked us how many other boats were coming. We said about 60, and they seemed much more impressed with the big boats coming than they did with us.
Yeah, he wanted to know a lot about Rio. He was very interested in Rio 100. Very little interest in the More 24. We want to talk about some specifics for double handing that are a little bit different than specifics for, well, I guess they'd apply to all offshore, but really pivotal for double handing. Some things we found out early on are like you can have your jibs built to be reefable. And what that enables you to do is have a jib that you don't have to change. So this is a photo of a number 3 here. And you can see that where the arrow is, that's a high clue on that jib. And so Mark and I could easily convert that jib from a number 3 to a blast reacher by just attaching a new sheet to it. And that enabled us to switch from a 3 to a blast reacher just, without really changing any sails.
Yeah, I think a big thing about double handing is knowing when to downshift a little bit. A lot of the game for racing is to try to race as close as you can to your polars for as long as possible. But you do need to find that that time when you need to downshift. We hit a couple of points where we did. So the other thing is having a good plan and a good setup for pulling out your jib and going wing on wing when you're DDW. And I think Ian will talk about the outgrabber, which actually turned out to be one of our MVP moves of the race.
Yeah, definitely. And so we have some more slides on that. We'll talk a little bit about outgrabbers and how to depower a spinnaker. A lot of this is about how to sail the boat efficiently without waking up the other person, which is key, and keeping it moving kind of, to Mark's point, at polar or as fast as you can. Being double-handed, you have to sail, no boat sailed to 100% of its rating, but you have to figure out a way to sail it to 90 or 95% of its rating. And so by conserving sleep or conserving the other off-watch's sleep, you're able to make sure they're pushing the boat when you're down for a nap. This is a photo of a number 1 with also a high clue in it, and this number 1 converts from a number 1 to a JT, to a jib top. So again, you're not changing sails. Mark and I also found that hanks rather than head foils were much better for double handing, because we could queue up. You can see our number 3 sitting here. We could queue up a new jib underneath the old one and tack the boat and just quickly under the hanks and raise the other one up without spending hours on the bow fighting a foil.
Hey, Ian, we got a question out there with the high clue on the number 3. Did you lower the halyard if you do drop the sail down with a different tack?
No, so you could do that, Michael. That's a great point, and it's something that I'm doing now on other boats offshore. This is just a high clue to make this sail into a blast reacher, right? The tack stays the same, but what we're doing now is we're building in a higher tack, and we're getting this sail to count as a heavy weather jib, as a number 4, so that we don't have to carry a heavy weather jib as well. We'll
I remember when Quantum called and asked if we'd accept that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it is a heavy weather jib.
Especially for the smaller double-handed boats, is space down below is at a huge premium. And likewise, being able to shift gears and have as broad a sail inventory as possible is also particularly important. So this setup allows you to kind of have your cake and eat it too.
Got it. Thank you.
Some other things we found for double handing is the more 24s normally sail with like 2 winches, and a lot of the small boats sail with 2 winches. We found that having another set of winches on the boat opened us up to be able to make changes to stuff without waking up the off watch. So we put in 2 self-tailing winches on the cabin top, in addition to the kind of primaries that are on the cockpit. And that enabled us to like square back the pole a little bit while you're going downwind, just reach forward and crank that thing back a little bit. And Mark and I also experimented with asymmetric kites, which we found really effective for jibing double-handed. They're a lot less of a headache than the pole jibe when you're double handing. Okay. Here's a shot of like a Capri 20 wing and wing on a pole setup here. Mark, do you want to speak to any of this?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff, in the next slide, I think, a couple of lessons learned, things that are really good to think about is it's great to have the setup to do all this stuff, but you also need to go out and test it, and you need to kind of test it under pressure, when there's a lot of wind and it's kind of rough, which we had, fortunately, the chance to do in a couple of long races before the Pac Cup. Even just things like finding out, where the optimal lead positions are for the the jibs and the guy lines and things like that. Here's a picture, upper right hand corner here is a picture of our starboard forward stanchion. When we finished the race, our guy line was, when the pole was all the way forward, was wrapped around the side of that. You can see that we've got some tubing around it, which was to prevent chafe. what we didn't anticipate was that the pressure on that would be so severe that it would actually just shear off the stanchion, which happened, as usually does, 2 o'clock in the morning. The other thing that we found out on the race was that our solar panels, one of our solar panels, fortunately not two, failed. So we wound up having to do a pretty extensive energy conservation plan for about 80% of the race. But just all of these things, whether it's your sails, whether it's your lead positions, whether it's the size of your blocks, just kind of can't stress enough the importance of setting things up and practicing with them and testing them. And because you will find, you will learn lessons every time you go out, and it's super important to try to get those bugs out, or as many of the bugs out of the system as you can before you start.
Yeah, I mean, Mark kind of alluded to the fact that we went and got some hose in Monterey in Spinnaker Cup because it was chafing on the lifeline. And I guess we should have realized we need to figure out a different way to have this set up than rubbing on the lifeline, because rubbing for 2,000 miles on a lifeline is not going to work. It works for blasting around the bay, but not long term. I don't know if you guys are familiar with an out grabber, but I stole this slide from Stan Honey because he did a fantastic job of drawing it up for us. But an out grabber, in essence, takes your spinnaker sheet and pulls it out to the end of the boom. And so what Mark and I found double-handed was when it would start to get really windy, we needed a way to depower and stabilize the spinnaker without maybe shifting from like an S2 to an S4. What we would do instead was we left the out grabber, which we used our reef line for, we brought it into a snatch block onto the spin sheet, and we ran it down to one of those winches on the cabin top, and we would just slowly pull that on as the squall came on, and it would flatten and stabilize out the kite, and then post squall, you would just ease it back to kind of the powered up setting. So Stan did include like an extra block up here that we didn't use. We just went from our stern block to the spinnaker and then had a out grabber pull that sheet out on the boom as needed.
This is also a pretty elegant way to, when you're running deep in a lot of wind, it helps prevent a crash jibe.
It does. Yeah, we'd surf by the lee and it would hold the boom out a little bit for you. And it really helps stabilize the boat, because when you're really deep running in heavy breeze, the kite wants to roll the boat to weather constantly. And this balances that out a little bit and stops some of that roly-poliness so you can sail a little deeper. Here is a photo of an out grabber in use in the Coastal Cup. Yeah, kind of the basic setup. A little more. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about sleep deprivation and what to do there.
So, I would say we're gonna a big part of sleeping on the boat revolves around your watch system and how you're sleeping. But just to kind of kick this topic off, I think Ian and I both feel like, giving a lot of thought to your sleep process and how you're going to deal with sleep deprivation, and conversely, how you're going to, what you're going to do to keep yourself awake. When you're on watch, it's kind of a fine balancing act, and it takes some practice. No surprise to anybody that we both, were heavily sleep deprived in the race. I probably had, definitely had a little bit harder time with that, just because it's a small boat, thin skin, you're sleeping right next to the water rushing by at 10 plus knots, which sounds like you're in a freight train, going through a bathtub. And there's just a number of things that you're always thinking about. So it's real. It will happen to you. I've heard a lot of our friends and peers in the Moore fleet who have gone to Hawaii who've talked about falling asleep at the helm and hallucinating and all sorts of other fun stuff. I don't think we ever got that bad, but it was definitely tough. And there was a lot of things that go into trying to manage that. And I think most importantly, also trying to prevent it.
Yeah, I mean, Mark and I both had different techniques to stay awake when you're just super tired, I think. Mark would drink as much liquid as he could and then spend the next 20 minutes trying to take a pee by himself. And I would be on deck, like slapping myself and singing to the spinnaker, trying to keep awake in the middle of the night. So it's definitely something that's going to creep up on you, and you're going to have to figure out if you're so far along that you need to, try and change a watch schedule or something, which we don't really suggest.
Sorry, just one other point on that, Ian,
shoot.
just for folks, because I know, coffee is a, keeping yourself awake. Coffee is something that a lot of people use. I'm certainly a coffee drinker. We didn't bring coffee on this race, and I did bring these things called cacao bites, which I had, a lesson learned. I'd never tried them before the race, and turned out that those things are super, super potent. And they also last longer than your 3-hour watch, which became a problem sort of managing the ups and the downs on that. So whatever you're going to do, don't do it for the first time on the race.
And if you're going to give up coffee, do it well in advance of the race. There's nothing worse than trying to go through coffee withdrawals like halfway to Farallons. It's not going to go well. So I gave up coffee when my first daughter was born. So I was 2 years into it. But Mark did sneak these cacao beads, and they were like cocaine to him. He was hooked. We had to throw him off.
I love that you guys are reflecting exactly the stuff we talked about during the provisioning. Don't try new stuff. Plan your coffee use. That's good reinforcement. Thank you.
Totally.
So talking a little bit about watches, there's kind of, I guess, 3 different watch systems that I've seen doublehanders use. There's a 3-on, 3-off. There's a 2-on, 2-off, and then there's a 3-on during the daylight hours and 2-off at night. Mark and I settled into the 3-on, 3-off, the top option, and I have that mapped out next to you. The main reason for that is it lines up really well with weather files out of sail docks. So like the NDFD comes out every 6 hours, and I was trying to pull that file in as soon as I could, and it would come right at my off watch. So I got off at 6 a.m. and the NDFD would be in sail docks, and I could jump down below, grab the NDFD really quickly while I was transitioning to go to sleep, and get that file, and then go back on watch, and then again jump off watch at noon and grab the NDFD. So we're kind of able to grab the most current weather files along the way. There are times where you might want to switch your watch schedule. You want to be very, very sure that you want to make that change. Like, you don't want to be sort of tired. You want to be fully exhausted if you're going to really make that change. We had a really rough night, I think on night 6 or 7. And we got kind of really, really tired, and we decided to go with the 2-hour watch schedule for the next, 18 hours until we could get into a place where we get a little sleep in both of us, and then switch back to our 3s. And we stayed with the 3s for the rest of the race until the finish. Mark, do you have anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I want to really underscore, the 3 and 3 was working generally pretty well for us, especially at night. As everybody can imagine, 3 hours, from midnight to 3 a.m. When you're tired, it's a long time to be, we were without autopilot, so it's a long time to be sailing. But it's really important to try to give the person who's off watch as much time to kind of recharge as possible. And, our feeling was we did everything we could to stay on it. And I think it was a big positive, because if once you get off of it, it's kind of hard to get back on it.
Yeah, it's really, really hard to get back in that spot. The only one that, I'm going to note on here that really messes with your off watch is the Pacific Cup requires you to check in at 8 a.m. for some strange reason. It's not near any weather reports. It's just like an arbitrary time that Michael picks. And it means that you have to wake up 2 hours after you went off watch to text someone that's not paying attention, to then go back to sleep. So really cool to move that.
We dropped it for 2020.
Nice.
Okay. Well, don't worry about that. Cross that pain off. Transpac still makes us do it, and I still have to wake up to do it. Food and drink. I guess we all ate freeze-dried. We loved it. It's good stuff. Mark didn't love his freeze-dried as much as I loved my freeze-dried. You will not eat with your other off watch when you're double handing. Like Mark would eat or I would eat, but you're never really eating together. That like camaraderie you have on a big boat where everyone on the Santa Cruz 50 eats except the driver, and they all share a bottle of wine, and they're having happy hour. That doesn't happen on the More 24. So you just eat your food while you're trying to hold the laptop and pull down the weather file and go to sleep. We brought some fresh apples along, which we really, really enjoyed. And then Mark found out that if you get fresh eggs, they will keep for a really long time at sea, as long as you rotate them, which fortunately for us, the bow of a Moore 24 is like a constant rotating machine. Mark, you want to talk about water and Jim Beam?
Yeah, so I mean, there's hydration wise, we both we had a dedicated water bottle for each of us, um, which we kept in the sheet bags, which were pretty close by. Ian mentioned that was pretty instrumental for me in terms of keeping awake at night. I would be kind of constantly helming and checking out what was going on and taking a sip of water. And yeah, I did have to wind up pee quite a bit, but it was a good rhythm that I kind of fell into and was able to stay hydrated, and which helps you stay awake too. We brought along 2 airplane bottles of Jim Beam, which were slated for the halfway mark, the halfway party. Here's me drinking my half of it. We we were so tired, and it was coincided with a pretty windy part of the race, so we just left the second bottle in the bilge and didn't ever touch it. Eating at this in double handing for us in a small boat was really about getting fuel into the body and keeping going. It wasn't a lot of pleasure in it. It is good to kind of practice. We did things before the race, like we practiced heating water and cooking and doing stuff, so that was kind of second nature to us. Particularly, I would say, in the first 3 days of the race, when your body is kind of getting punched in the face between being offshore, and usually that's a pretty windy part of the race. So having just the basic living elements of cooking and what your food is like and all that, having that kind of be second nature before you leave the dock, I think is really important. And then last bullet point there, we already talked about caffeine. So all I can just say again is practice before you go.
And we, just like probably Melinda recommended in the provisioning thing, Mark and I both had 1 gallon bags with days written on them. And we would just go, day by day through that food, so that it was kind of, you didn't have to think about it. You just reached out, you grabbed day 5, you ate that, and you just went with it.
So
go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'll tee it up. One of the things that I think Ian and I wanted to underscore for everybody here is that a man overboard situation is exponentially harder when you're shorthanded. So the Pac Cup, the minimum equipment requirements do a really good job of providing a roadmap for for what you absolutely need to have, and thinking through, can the person on the helm actually access the the VHF if someone does go overboard? How does that all work? But I really just cannot stress enough that the dynamics, because you think about it, if someone goes overboard, you're single handing, and you're probably going to be taking down a kite. It's probably going to be the nighttime. It's probably going to be windy. There's a lot of things to manage on your own. And you're not going to have enough hands, and it's really important, I think, to think through how you're going to not only slow the boat down and turn around, but then how you're going to find that person, and do you have access to all those things at your fingertips, so that you can not only find that person, but also steer the boat and get the boat back to them at the same time. So there's a couple of things on the list here. I'll let Ian go through those that we took advantage of through our race.
Yeah, I mean, we had these the Smart Find S20s, and you can, if you want, you can go out and you can call the Coast Guard on the 16th, and you can tell them you're going to set one off and practice getting your B&G over to it, so you can see where your ASI marks are and see where this is. So Mark and I went out and we fired one off and threw it off in a bucket, and both of us need to know how to get that B&G screen up so that we could see where the man overboard was. And it's a good exercise to understand how you're going to do that, because I mean, even on bigger boats, a lot of times only the navigator knows how to go flipping through the screens and find that. Well, if the navigator's the man overboard, we need someone else to know how to flip through those screens and get that stuff up. So the personal AIS, I think, are really great tools, and I think the Pac Cup does a great job of requiring you to do a man overboard drill and try some of that stuff. Living down below, it is cramped, and I think the key to a COVID situation or double handing a 24-foot boat to Hawaii is being clean. Like, you're always going to put your shit away, because if you go off watch and your partner's stuff is just like strewed all over, you're mad because you can't find your stuff. So you got to be like pretty respectful of the other person's stuff, and trying to put your stuff in your dry bag and seal it up and put it away so that when they go down below, it's kind of ready for them to get down there. Yeah, this is a picture of the bow of More 24 halfway to Hawaii. We did some fuel storage here and there's some other stuff going on, but pretty sparse accommodations.
And then we talked about the importance of sleep. One of the MVPs of our race was definitely the carbon fiber articulating bunk, which you can see in the picture here. Kind of the way we do this is in the articulating part is you basically climb into your sleeping bag, kind of wiggle your head back to the aft of the boat, so your feet would be facing the picture taker in this case, and then you'd reach up and you'd use the pulley system to basically wedge that bunk up, almost as vertical as you could possibly get, and it kind of created this sandwich between the bunk and the side of the hull with you in the middle. And it doesn't sound like that great of a situation sitting here talking about it, but I'll tell you, when you're offshore and you're heeled over 30 degrees, the boat's bouncing all over the place, it is so much easier to relax and get some sleep if you are not worried about falling out of your bunk, and that you're just perfectly cocooned in there, and nothing's going to shake you out. The other thing, a small lesson learned, the More 24 has these two fixed pipe berths, which actually look really comfortable. And I would guess that a couple of people have gone on races to Hawaii without having really spent a lot of time on those bunks. They're actually not that comfortable to sleep in. So you'll notice here that the mesh is supported by bungee, basically a long line of bungee, which gives it some extra spring in it. And, again, the importance of creating kind of a comfortable and a safe feeling sleeping platform just cannot be overstated. I've been on other races where I haven't had that benefit, and it's been pretty miserable.
It was so important to us that when we finally jibed, we only had one of these cool bunks, just the way the budget worked out. And we ended up trying to sleep on the high side of the boat for, I don't know, like one watch. And Mark and I kept getting flung out of the stock bunk and thrown around. And so finally, we just moved the sails that were on the low side up to the high side bunk, and both of us slept on the leeward side of the boat. Even though it wasn't faster for us, it meant that we could sleep more. And I think that getting that sleep is huge. One thing Mark and I also discovered is that it is extremely important to get out of your fallies and get into a sleeping bag. Even if that's on day one and it seems miserable, like getting out of fallies, getting in a dry sleeping bag and just getting some decent sleep really helps you out later on. In the 15 Coastal Cup, Mark and I tried to just be he-men or road warriors or whatever and sleep in the cockpit in our fallies, and we were absolutely exhausted and trashed and making horrible decisions later on. Go down below, get off your gear, hang it up on a hook, and climb in your bunk. It takes 3 minutes to do, but it makes it so you can actually enjoy some sleep. On this last Transpac I was on, we were in stacked bunks, and a gentleman who will remain nameless, he got in his bunk above me, soaking wet in his fallies, and dripped all over me, and I was very, very cross with him when I woke up wet. That's a picture of our route to Hawaii. Not, just very exciting. San Francisco, Hawaii.
Hey, before we get into
and
that,
then I guess the final question.
Yeah, we got one question. Patrick,
Yeah, go ahead.
who's crewed with me on numerous occasions, asks, did you do anything special to keep your sleeping bags dry on the moor?
Well, we had dry bags for our sleeping bags, but we also had those crazy expensive European sleeping bags. You guys know the ones I'm talking about?
No.
I'm just putting in this closet. There we go. Oh.
Ian,
I
Ian
keep
loves
my
his so
sailing
much
stuff in
that
the
he keeps
nursery.
it handy.
It's the Ocean Sleepwear sleeping bag. It's like fully Gore-Tex and fleece. And you can go to sleep in this sleeping bag dripping wet and you will wake up dry. It's amazing. Bill Erklund's tipped us off these things and I've never looked back.
Sounds like it would be good for the baby too.
Yeah, you know, they can spit up in it and they're dry when they wake up. It's very good that way. One thing you're going to have to decide on a small boat is autopilot or no autopilot. Mark, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, I think for us, the decision on autopilot or no autopilot came down to 3 factors. Number 1 was weight. It was the weight of the system itself, and then, you know, keyed off on the energy that it would consume. So weight was a key function. It was also just another significant project that we'd already done a lot of work on Moss to get her ready for the race, and there were some things that we didn't get to or just felt like it was too much, and that was another big project. So I think you know, the other thing too is it felt like putting an autopilot system on our boat that could sail better than we could would probably revolve around getting, you know, something that that, you know, the minis are using, or some sort of pretty beefy system. A lot of people on smaller boats go with and we actually bought 2 of them. I forget the name of these systems, but they're the Raytheon, you know, small little arm things. And we had some feedback from Webb Childs, who just got done with the circumnavigation, that he would take like 4 or 5 of those things with him on a long passage, because he just knew he was going to be breaking them and, you know, jury rigging them. So we just kind of took a look at the project factors, the weight factors, the energy that's required to go with that, what that would do in terms of battery, do in terms of solar power, and we just decided that, you know, it'd be better for us to go and just without the autopilot and just helm the whole time.
Yeah, I think Mark's bringing up all the great points there. Is that you have to figure out how you're going to power it, and then you also have to kind of realize that it's not going to do, a tiller pilot is not going to do a great job of sailing under spinnaker. Some of those expensive systems like they have in a Vendée boat or, you know, a mini, they're for sure going to do it, but those systems probably cost as much as a Moore 24. So it doesn't really make sense to invest that into one. Just leave it at home. And I've talked to some other folks who have said in real light air they've been good. You know, I don't have experience with that, but in big breeze they do not seem to work very well.
Michael, I think there was another question I saw pop up there about, was it Etoy fuel cells?
Yeah, sorry, I was having trouble with the mute. Yeah, Peter Frey is asking about that. I've looked at those myself, but I'd be interested in your thoughts.
So we went with lithium ion, and I think we had 120 amps separated between 2 60 amp batteries. And I'm frankly not familiar with Etoy. I don't know if Ian is.
Well, the fuel cells are super cool, and I think that's a great technology. I think when we were out there, it was still fairly expensive. A fuel cell, I think, was $6,000 when we were looking at this, and that's most of a Pac Cup budget on a Moore 24. They are really cool and a really great way to get energy. So if it's in your budget, I would think a fuel cell would be fantastic, and it would also be worth exploring. You know, we tried to go too complicated of a solar system. We didn't want to have a big panel hang off the back of the boat, and so we took 2 small panels and deck mounted them. And don't do that. Get a big panel, hang off the back of the boat. That system works very well. And if you do that, you won't have power problems. And I guess try and, you know, people have gone to Hawaii for, Michael, what are we in now, the 20th running of the Pac Cup?
Well, at 21st actually running of the Pac Cup, if it happens, but yeah, it's been going for 40 years. So
yeah, people have been going for 40 years, and they you know, the small boats without generators, they throw a huge panel on the back of the boat, and they all do fine. We tried to get a little too cute with it, and it kind of caught us. So.
Yeah, I think they all do fine is an overstatement. We've seen a lot of double handers that have relied heavily on solar panels end up taking some pretty significant hits for failure to communicate because of power failure. But I think the technology's gotten better between the lithium and the efficiency of the solar panels. I know that.
And sideband radios use a ton of power. So, now that we have sat phones readily available, it saves a ton of power.
Right. And we've dropped the sideband. People are using LED lights. So the whole power profile from 20 years ago to today has just changed dramatically. Final point on those EFOY fuel cells. They are very pricey, and to carry enough alcohol to run them, you're still looking at a lot of stuff though. So, but technology marches on.
Last point while we've got this slide up, because it was one of our major challenges. We had one of our solar panels failed, and on top of that, you think you're sailing to Hawaii and you're in the sunshine and trade winds the whole time. It felt to us like we had cloud cover for probably 80% of the way there. So if you look at this spreadsheet here, I think, and I certainly viewed it that way before. Ian was the one who put this together, and it was, I was glad that he was doing it. And I paid a little bit of attention to it, but not a ton. But if you wind up with any sort of power issues, all of a sudden you're going to be digging out this spreadsheet and paying a lot more close attention to it. And the other recommendation I'd have for folks would be to spend a lot of time really thinking through this spreadsheet, how much your instruments are drawing. Go out and actually watch the voltmeter and see how much things are drawing and whether it matches the theory, because this stuff can be very important. It's been, most races I've been on, we've had some challenges with whether it's turning the engine on and charging batteries or solar panels failing or something. And when it works, it's kind of like, out of sight, out of mind. And when it doesn't, it becomes really, really important.
Yeah. So a final comment from Peter. I guess the fuel cell's down to 4K, and he says just 2 gallons for the race for fuel. You'll need to do your own math. But to echo Mark's point, getting a properly installed and understood charge meter that not only looks at your volts, but looks at your amp usage, get it properly configured for your battery bank to check your state of charge, and have an understanding with your crew about when it's time to charge and when it's not. We had some trouble on my boat on that. Is really important, and it just makes your race faster. One final thing I like to do, by the way, I unplug the boat a month before the race. And I stay off the city power, just to see what's weak. If I've got a bad battery, I want to know it now. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's great advice. So what Mark's kind of alluding to on this is we thought we were at 7.5 amps from each panel. We lost the panel at the Farallongs, so they went 7.5 amps. And then all this off non-peak charging, that didn't happen. So we ended up getting about 5 amps from one panel each day. And if you look at that, that puts us in a pretty big deficit pretty quickly here. And we ended up not being able to run our instruments during the daytime at all. So that was a huge negative for us. We just had to steer by a wet compass during the day. And then at night, we had a 3-pod instrument cluster. We took it apart and disconnected 2 so that we could get it down to less amperage, and just had one rotating between, TWA and compass course, which takes some of the fun out of it because you don't have the fun meter up there to know what's going on. So, really get out there and really beat this stuff up. In the 100-mile qualifier race, you should get some good data points. Michael's idea of firing these things up and running them, double-hand a boat with solar panels, they could be on the trailer. You could leave all your stuff on and, walk away for a week, and it should all be working when you get back. And that'd be a great test to do. And I think that's all we got for you. I don't know how long we were supposed to go, Michael. I don't know if there's any other questions, a little Q&A that anyone has any questions on. We're free to.
No, that was good. Before we get into the Q&A, I'll add one more point. First of all, great job of not only covering the double-handed tricks, but just some general race stuff. I'm going to let people know that you really include a lot of good information. One thing, when you do that stress test on your electrical system, you'll find out who your friends are, because they will all call to tell you that your masthead light is on. So yeah, if folks have questions, you can post them to chat, or you can raise your hand. I can even turn it on so you can talk if you want to hear your voice on the recording. Oh, there's a question coming up there from, not really a double-handed specific question, but symmetric versus asim kite. This is Carl Haflinger. Performance on a boat that can do both?
Yeah. Mark and I played around a lot with it. We built a A5 because we thought there was a gap in our reaching inventory. So we had local sailmaker build us an A5. We went out and used it in some moderate air. The boat reached well with it. Actually, the boat did a lot of things really well with it. It's a bit of a challenge to do a 5-string jibe, and what I mean by that is you have on your tack, you have 2 guys and you have a tack line, and then you have a spinnaker sheet that goes around the outside of that. So to jibe, you come off the pole, you go onto the tack line, you get the pole out of the way, the kite goes around the outside of the boat, you jibe the boat, you move the pole to the new guy on the other side of the head stay, and you bring the pole back. That process takes a little bit of time to get used to it in your head. Once you do that a couple of times, it's actually pretty seamless and pretty quick. Later on, we had an A25 built, which we had built a half square foot smaller than the class kite. We did that because PHRF rates you the same with the kite. It rates you your biggest kite, and we didn't want to get rated with a bigger kite, so we got a penalty. So we built an A25. We had a lot of luck with that. We actually raced against the Moore fleet with it, and we found we were faster all the time with it. We did bring 2 symmetric kites. We brought an S4, an S4 and a class kite. And we had not tested the upwind range of our asymmetrical kites. We hadn't tested over 30 knots, TWS, and we got to a point where we had tested the S4 over 30 knots. And after a couple of heroic wipeouts and a Chinese jibe, we decided it was time to put up a symmetric kite that we knew would work in those heavier air conditions. Hindsight being 2020, we would have changed the way we set the boat up, and we would have reefed the main and kept the asim kite up on the pole. The boat was rounding up, and it was because the bang was on too tight, and there was a little too much other stuff going on with the main. But we didn't learn that kind of until later on down the road.
Yeah, it's good to get those things tested in heavier wind. We discovered that one race where a whole bunch of sails blew up for a variety of user errors. And had we had them out in the heavier wind, we'd have known better. And I interrupted you, Mark.
Well, I was going to say, just at a high level, if you can have an inventory, and Michael, I imagine you guys do on the 50. A lot of boats that were originally, rigged as symmetrical running boats, but are light enough to handle the asim kites. The performance gains are absolutely eye-opening, especially, really were for us on Moss in practice. So I can't say enough good things about, taking a boat that might be well suited to it, but is just a little bit older vintage and going back to it. One other point, just to clarify, we flew our asim off the pole, not off of a bowsprit.
Yeah, here's a photo of an asim kite off a pole. I think that's what you guys do on the 50, right, Michael?
Yes, it is. And we found it to be, we got a bunch of questions coming up here. We found it to be super effective as forecast by our marine architect that we consulted, but of course he was working with a bunch of other 50s. We did carry some square kites that were left over in the inventory. In fact, I had my boat partner just bring some out of the back of the garage, like the day we were departing, and I said, well, let's just carry one more just for the hell of it, because you never know. And Patrick, who I think is on the line, stuck his hand in each of the bags, and he'd only been with us for a couple of days. He was a last minute walk on because of illness, And he sort of like felt the one that I guess was the crispiest, and he said, "Yeah, take that one." Well, it turned out, through a variety of odd circumstances, we blew up every single spinnaker on the boat, except this undersized, symmetric, 1992 vintage square kite. Well, we took second in division with that, so you never know. But yeah, for us, the asymmetrical kite on the pole really performed brilliantly, and it's been wonderful for us. So Ian Springer asked 5 questions, just like Passover. The first, I know it's 4. The first is, any value in a reaching strut when running ASOs off the pole may save a stanchion at the least? Oh, hell yes.
Yes.
Any disagreement there?
No, first I'll say hi to Ian Springer. We were in the same high school class at Redwood a long time ago. So hi, Ian.
Cool.
There is huge value in a reaching strut. I can't stress it. We wish we had one. Everyone that we tell to run asymmetric kites, and Michael will attest to on the 50, we tell, run a reaching strut, figure out how to do a reaching strut. On a moor, it needs to stick off the side of the boat, 18 to 24 inches, and it is going to reduce the load massively on the guy. We didn't tell you this, but after we broke the stanchion, and we also started breaking guys, we would break the guy at the shackle on the kite every 24 hours. So every day we would switch the guy, and then on my off watch, I would splice the guy back onto the T5 or T5, the small shackle, the Talisker shackle. And we would just go in the process of every 24 hours changing it out. And it was just chafing because the angle was so tight to the front of the boat that it was under a huge amount of load.
Okay, so here's 2 questions that sort of go together in a sense. Did you use a spin net, and do you have thoughts on a spin sock when double-handed?
So we did not use a spin net on this race. I've used them on 2 transpacks on a Cal 40, and I would say that they were absolutely essential, really, really helpful. So can't say enough good things about a spin net. Mostly we didn't have a problem with the asym kites, but certainly for the symmetrical kites, I think it's really important.
I want to interject one thing about spin nets. If you carry one, use it. Great, have fun with it. If you don't carry one, you wrap a kite. The first thing you do if you can't get that wrap out is jibe the boat.
Yeah.
Jibe the boat. Doesn't matter. Just jibe the boat, and that wrap will come out lickety split. You think I'm crazy? You think it sounds nuts? We wrapped a kite on Velvet Hammer in last year's Coastal Cup, and it was really wicked up off conception. And none of us could figure out how to get it off. And we had a lot of smart guys on the boat, and we were way overstood. And I finally just made us jibe the boat because we were going the wrong way, and it came out 30 seconds later. We spent an hour going the wrong direction. So
if you can manage it, sailing by the lee can have the same impact. Either way, you're just trying to reverse the vortex that wrapped it in the first place.
Yeah.
He's got 2 more questions. Twin pole jibes, smart or asking for trouble?
I've done twin pole jibes on a Cal 40. They work pretty well. I don't know. I think it's a lot of work on a small boat. Mark, what do you think?
Totally agree. I mean, Ian and I have done the Cal 40 thing, and actually we were, if I remember correctly, someone on our boat successfully jibed the spinnaker without waking anyone up, single-handed on the Cal 40, and we were only able to do that because of the twin poles.
Yeah, we did it occasionally on the Passport 40 that I used to race. We never tried it on the Santa Cruz 50 because we'd gone to ASIM, and my crew kind of stared at me when I suggested it. The final question from Ian Springer, who gives us all of our questions apparently, is a double-handed squall game plan?
Well, I mean, I'll start off by saying Moor 24 is not fast enough to go play the fun squall game. So then you have to decide, is the squall worth waking the other person up for? Is it, like everyone kind of talks about, you learn your lesson on the first squall of the night. You're going to learn that lesson. And you're going to realize if you can kind of just keep sailing, or if you really need to exit stage left, which is kind of the typical game plan. Some years you can, or some nights you can just keep going the way you're going and be fine. Sometimes you have to jibe. So if you learn in the first squall that it's a huge suck squall behind it and you have to jibe, there's a big dead area. And I hope you guys know what I mean by that is sometimes when you're on starboard, after the squall passes, the way it kind of shifts the wind to the right 15 degrees, it makes like a light spot behind it for probably a half hour, maybe an hour. And you don't want to get stuck there. So the typical advice is to jibe the boat to port and exit stage left. And so if you learn that the hard way, you might end up waking the guy up and jibe the boat as soon as you get in the squall. They'll stay in a little longer, and then when it passes, you'll be back in the trades quicker on the other side of the squall. Ian asked about spinnaker socks. We did not use one, but a lot of other double-handed boats getting closer to the 30-foot range really use them a lot and have a lot of success with them.
Yeah, I know.
Mark,
Sally and Stan believe in them pretty. Sally Honey and Stan Lindsay Honey believe in them pretty religiously for a lot of circumstances. I think the spinnaker sock and maybe having a spare spinnaker gives you, in many cases, the confidence to put up a kite you might be a little shy about doing. So I got two questions that came in on the chat that I didn't notice. Sorry guys. Question one is, to use the outgrabber with both the asim and symmetrical kites, and Patrick asks about staysails.
Okay, go ahead, Mark.
As I say, we did not use the outgrabber with the asim. You know, if with more time, we probably would have looked at some different ways of depowering. I think our experience and the peculiarities of the More 24 is that probably the best way to depower for us and solve our problems would have been to reef earlier on the main.
So we didn't use the outgrabber on the ASIMs. A staysail, we ran out of sail budget and sail testing budget. I think, I mean, I love staysails. I think you set them and you gain a half a knot, and you furl them and you gain a half a knot. I mean, they're the modern blooper. I constantly on other boats were saying, oh, set the staysail, oh, strike the staysail. And I swear the bow guy is up there furling and unfurling the thing half the race, and he's having a lot of fun with it. So
you got to do something to keep the bow guy up there, or else they'll come back in the cockpit and give you advice.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. So I think a staysail makes a lot of sense. I think you do kind of a TP52 style staysail with a little bit lower clue. And they're super effective. We used one to great success last year in Transpac. So,
hey, here's a great question from Peter Frey. How long did you take to get to Hawaii? I know the answer to that. I believe it was 11 days, right? And what was
10 days, 18 hours.
Oh, excuse me. And
hey,
what was your
I think it was actually 10 days. It was 10 days, 14 hours. Look at the back of your shirt.
How the hell is he going to look at the back of his shirt? Okay. So what was your PHRF rating? I think Peter's trying to gauge it for his own mini Transat. And how many days did you plan for?
Our downwind certified rating was 642. The class rating for a More 24 is 636. When you get certified, you do the weights and measures, and you get weighed with an outboard on board, which you don't get for the class rating. So we were a little slower than a stock More 24. And how many days did you plan for? We provisioned the boat for 14 days.
Yeah.
We planned for about 14 days. But I was running, we had built a polar for the boat, and I was running routing on the boat, in historic conditions and the conditions right up to the day of the race. And so we kind of knew it was going to be wicked up, and it was going to be, 12-ish, 13-ish day run to Hawaii. So I say we're provisioned for 14, but we also had kind of additional food you wouldn't want to eat in addition to that, a couple days worth of stuff you really wouldn't want to eat if you had to.
Yeah, 2016 was a bit of an outlier for weather. A lot of records got set, including in my division. Is a ton of wind, and then the year before it was on and off. And there have been years where More 24 sure took a long time to get to Hawaii. So you got to watch the weather.
My first Pac Cup was with Patrick Lewis, and it took us 16 and a half days to get there. I thought we'd never get to Hawaii. I think we missed the award ceremony.
Yeah, well, that happened to me in my first Pac Cup too. Well, we didn't miss the awards ceremony. We arrived about 2 hours before the awards ceremony. But that was back when if you finished after the deadline, they didn't even recognize you were there, which really hurt my feelings. So
Yeah, it was 2000. It was an incredibly slow year.
yeah, that was the year I'm talking about.
Yeah, Patrick's correcting me. He said we made the awards, but we missed the first party.
Yeah, if you took 16 days, you would have made the awards. We took 17. So let's see if we got any more questions. Make a last call. Okay, well, Ian, can I have this material to put up on the web, and we'll also put the recording up, assuming that recording it here on my local PC worked properly.
Of course, yeah. I'll send you the file. I think you already kind of have it, and Mark and I are free to questions. If anyone racing this year wants to reach out to us, feel free to shoot us an email. Michael has our contact information, and he can put us in touch.
I do. Folks, thank you all for joining in. Ian and Mark, thank you for your time, and this is a great set of slides and a bunch of really useful advice, as was pointed out, not just for double handers. You guys really provided a lot of great information, so thank you very much.
Cheers, everybody.
All right, and our next seminar will be next Tuesday, Mary Lovely, on the subject of personal welfare. Which is always good because taking care of yourself, particularly these days, is a hot topic. So I'm going to stop the recording. That is not how we stop.